They called her the numbers girl in a company that would not have survived a federal audit without her. Years later, when people asked Natalie Barrett where everything started, she never said with the raid or with the general or even with the arrests. She said, "It started when they misnamed my work long enough to think they could misname my husband." Precision mattered to her. If you named humiliation correctly, you could stop swallowing it. On the morning of the board vote, she stood in the mirrored elevator rising to the top floor of Cresswell Defence Analytics and watched her own face settle into neutrality. Navy sheath dress, charcoal jacket, no jewellery except her wedding band, and a slim watch that vibrated silently with calendar reminders she didn't need. Beside her, Eli rested one hand lightly at the small of her back, never steering, just there. He wore a dark suit that looked unremarkable until he moved. Then the posture gave him away. Still, alert, balanced like a man used to deciding where doors and exits were the second he entered a room. "Last chance to fake food poisoning," he murmured. "Too many witnesses," she said. He smiled at that. She didn't. Not because she was afraid of presenting. She had briefed generals, inspectors, appropriation staffers, and one senator who believed volume was an argument. But Cresswell's board had a different cruelty. It was intimate, rehearsed, deniable. They let you build the architecture and then introduced you as support staff. The conference room was exactly what Cresswell thought power should look like. Walnut veneer table polished to museum shine, glass walls with motorized shades, donor portraits lining one wall as if dead men could still vote. The city spread below them in winter light. Along the far end sat the board, 8 men and 1 woman from investor relations, all in variations of expensive restraint. Their tablets glowed with Natalie's deck. Her deck, and if history held, someone else's credit. Chairman Robert Keene gave her a smile calibrated for cameras. "Natalie, always a pleasure. We'll keep this tight this morning." Tight meant controlled. Controlled meant she would get 10 minutes for analysis after spending 6 months designing the risk framework that had put Cresswell in position to bid on a Pentagon account 5 times larger than anything they had ever managed. The proposal was hers from spine to appendix: procurement safeguards, conflict screening, subcontractor transparency layers, escalation protocols. She had built the thing to survive bad actors because she already worked among them. Keene nodded toward Eli as if noticing him only now. "And this is your husband, Evan?" "Eli," Natalie said. "Right, welcome. We appreciate family support on stressful days." The board chuckled politely, a room full of men pretending they hadn't asked Eli to attend because 2 directors were more comfortable voting on a defense account if someone with field credibility sat in the back row. He had been invited as symbolism and now reduced to spouse decor. Halverson arrived 2 minutes late and still managed to look like he had been waiting for everyone else. Silver tie, careful hair, expression of patient disappointment. Director Thomas Halverson ran procurement oversight and called himself a reformer while blocking every transparency measure Natalie pushed, unless he could attach his initials first. He took his seat, glanced at Natalie's printed summary packet, and said, "Our numbers girl came prepared." No one corrected him. Not Keene, not legal counsel, not Michael Pierce, her former mentor, now chief strategy officer, who had once told her, "Document everything, Nat. Institutions forget what women do unless it costs them not to." He had said that before he started forwarding her frameworks with his name in the footer. She gave her presentation anyway. Slide by slide, she walked them through risk scoring on subcontractors, historical failure points in defense analytics rollouts, control gates to catch invoice inflation before payment. She kept her voice level and her shoulders loose. She answered questions before they were asked and the ones designed to trip her. By the end, even hostile directors had stopped pretending to check email. When she finished, Keene steepled his fingers. "Strong work, very strong work. We'll move to the vote after Council confirms conflict disclosures." It should have been routine. A formal vote to place the Pentagon account under Natalie's team instead of operations, where Halverson's allies lived. If approved, her division would control procurement audit trails and independent reporting lines. No more quiet adjustments. No more invoices passed by expedite authority. No more friends rewarding friends with federal money and calling it strategy. Natalie clicked her remote off and sat. Under the table, Eli's knee touched hers once. A silent breathe. She took one breath, then another, and let herself imagine a week from now. Implementation teams staffed, safeguards live, Her whistleblower packet unnecessary because the board finally chose governance over theatre. Halverson cleared his throat. "Before we vote," he said, "there is a matter of immediate ethical contamination." The phrase was so legalistic that at first she thought it had to do with vendor disclosures. Then he pulled a cream folder from his briefcase and slid it down the polished table toward Chairman Keane. Red tab, internal review stamp, legal copied. Keane opened it, and his expression changed in stages. Irritation, confusion, then a sharp stillness that made the room tilt. "Tom," he said carefully, "where did this come from?" "Anonymous submission through compliance, corroborated this morning," Halverson said. "I asked counsel to hold until we had baseline verification. Given Mr. Barrett's informal advisory role in this proposal, we cannot proceed until this is addressed." Natalie felt her pulse in her throat. "Eli has no advisory role on this bid." Halverson didn't look at her. "That may be your understanding." Keane turned pages. "These are serious allegations." The folder moved to corporate counsel, then to Pierce, then back again. Nobody met her eyes for a full 10 seconds. Eli sat upright, hands on the table, expression unreadable. Finally, Keane said, "Mr. Barrett, there are claims here that your military resume contains fabricated service entries and that your contractor credentials were obtained under false representation." Silence, heavy and greedy. Across the glass wall, an assistant in the corridor stopped walking. Eli spoke evenly. "Those claims are false." Counsel cleared his throat. "For record integrity, we need to ask direct questions. Full legal name, prior service components, dates of deployment." Natalie cut in. "This has nothing to do with the agenda item." Keane held up a hand. "Natalie, please, if there's any chance the proposal relied on misrepresented credentials," it didn't, "then verification should clear this quickly." That was when she understood the choreography. Not because of the allegation itself, but because of timing. 2 minutes before the vote, after months of delay tactics, after she had notified internal audit that she intended to submit a procurement anomaly packet under board review protocol. If she were tied to ethical contamination, she could be recused pending investigation. Her control over the Pentagon account would vanish for neutral oversight, and the same executives she had been documenting would inherit emergency authority. Halverson leaned back, hands folded in practiced concern. "No one is making conclusions. We're simply protecting the company." The woman from Investor Relations shifted uncomfortably. Pierce studied the table grain like it had become fascinating. Counsel began questioning Eli anyway, voice clipped for the transcript. Unit designation, contracting firm affiliations, credentialing officer names. Eli answered what he could and refused details he was not authorized to disclose. Each refusal was marked with a note that sounded, to people who wanted a villain, like evasion. One director mispronounced the unit printed in the dossier and smirked when corrected. Another asked whether redacted records were convenient. A third, smiling as if asking about weather, said to Natalie, "Did you perhaps overstate your husband's background in order to strengthen your own standing on command matters?" Heat flashed up her neck. "My standing is based on my work." "Of course," he said. "No offense intended. Every offense intended. All of it designed for witnesses, for recording, for plausible deniability later. We simply asked necessary questions." Keane's voice turned procedural. "Given potential reputational exposure, I'm freezing the procurement vote pending credential verification. Security should stand by outside until we resolve attendance status." The assistant at the door nodded and disappeared. Natalie heard the soft click of an outside lock disengaging, a performance of order, a warning. Her tablet buzzed once. Internal alert from audit. Board agenda amended. Emergency authority draft loaded. They were moving already. If this accusation stood through the afternoon, Eli could lose his clearance while investigators sorted fiction from classified truth. Even if cleared later, damage to his name would travel faster than correction. Cresswell's legal team would distance itself from him publicly, and distance in defense contracting could end a career built on trust you were never allowed to describe. For Natalie, The blast radius was immediate and precise. Recusal for conflict, suspension of procurement control, her whistleblower packet delayed by process review, which in Cresswell dialect meant buried until useful people retired. The Pentagon account handed to operations where invoice trails blurred and shell vendors multiplied. Federal money would flow through the same pipe she had spent a year proving was cracked, and everyone in this room would sign the minutes saying the decision had been made under urgent ethical concern. She looked down at the vote packet in front of her, her name printed in clean black type, and remembered 5 years in compressed fragments, drafting a risk matrix at midnight while the vice president presented it at dawn as his strategic breakthrough, being praised as indispensable each time promotions went to men she trained, sitting beside Pierce while he advised her to keep evidence because systems only respected records, then watching him delete her byline from a briefing as casually as correcting a typo. Eli's hand moved closer to hers but did not touch. He knew better than to interrupt her thinking when it turned this quiet. Across the table, Halverson tapped the dossier once. If Mr. Barrett is legitimate, this will all be unfortunate and temporary. If not, we've prevented a catastrophe. Natalie met his eyes then. There was no outrage in him, no moral panic, only calculation and relief at having struck first. She slid her notebook open and wrote 3 words in small block letters. Not about Eli. Then beneath it, preemptive, recusal path. She cared because truth mattered, yes. Because her husband deserved better than being used as a disposable lever, yes. But also because this room had mistaken her composure for surrender for too many years. They thought they were humiliating her into compliance. What they were doing, line by line, was creating the cleanest record of coordinated misconduct she had ever been handed. Counsel asked another question. Keene called for a 10-minute recess that no one took. Outside, security footsteps approached and stopped. The glass reflected the whole room back at her. Polished table, donor portraits, men arranging blame before lunch. Natalie reached into her bag and felt the worn edge of a bronze challenge coin she had carried since field years, an old signal from a world where credentials were verified by people who still understood consequence. She left it there for the moment, palm closed around metal gone warm with her skin. When she looked up, her spine was straight, her voice calm. Put every word on record, she said. I intend to answer all of it. Corporate counsel looked pleased she had made it easy. Thank you, Ms. Barrett, he said, fingers poised over his keyboard. For clarity, are you requesting these proceedings continue in full transcript? Yes, Natalie said, verbatim. Halverson gave a soft, regretful sigh, as if this were all unfortunate weather. No one benefits from dramatics. She didn't look at him. Then stop performing. A thin smile from 2 seats down. One director muttered, combative. Keene tapped the table once. Let's stay professional, mister. Barrett, please continue with counsel's questions. Eli inclined his head. Ask. Counsel resumed. Did you deploy in Kandahar province in 2012 under contract designation Sierra Delta? I can't confirm operation labels in open board setting. Open? Halverson cut in, glancing around the room. These are directors with fiduciary clearance. Eli's tone never changed. Corporate fiduciary clearance is not operational clearance. Someone snorted. Someone else made a note for show. Investor Relations stared at her tablet like she wished she were anywhere else. Natalie lifted a hand. Chairman, I'm requesting immediate source disclosure for the dossier and chain of custody. If you're suspending a board vote based on alleged fraud, provenance is material. Keene didn't hesitate. Denied until credential verification is complete. Then you're validating an unverified packet while blocking scrutiny of origin. We are following counsel's recommendation. Counsel didn't deny it. He just said, Ms. Barrett, your comments are noted. That word, noted, the corporate graveyard where objections went to die. Halverson pushed a button on his tablet. The wall display woke up, replacing Natalie's risk control slide with a grainy screenshot. One line from what looked like a personnel history page, cropped so tightly that only a name fragment, a date range, and a red circle were visible. There, he said, voice turning instructional. Deployment date discrepancy. Claimed 18 months, verified record shows 6. That is not rounding error. Eli frowned at the screen. That's not a full record. It's what compliance received. It's a screenshot with no source header, Natalie said. No timestamp, no retrieval token, no cert signature. Halverson spread his hands. Because certain records are redacted, Natalie. You don't redact authentication metadata. A director near the end leaned forward, smiling like a man about to tell a joke at someone's expense. Maybe she would know that if she had command experience. Another answered before she could. Come on. She married command experience. The laugh this time was short, sharp, and intentionally audible. Eli turned his head toward them very slowly. He didn't raise his voice. Say it again! Keene snapped. Enough! We're not doing that. But he said it after. Always after. Natalie pressed her thumb hard into the edge of her pen until the plastic flexed. Rage was easy. Useful rage was harder. She opened her notebook to a clean page and drew a vertical line down the centre. Statements on the left, evidence response on the right. A habit from field briefings, emotion parked, sequence preserved. Counsel continued his questions. Credentialing sponsor, contracting intermediary, why certain years were sparse, why one listed consulting period overlapped with a redacted federal assignment. Eli answered inside the boundaries he was legally allowed. Every boundary was treated like guilt. Outside the glass wall, 2 security officers took positions near the door and pretended to check badges on passers-by. The assistant from the corridor no longer met anyone's eyes. Natalie's tablet buzzed again. Another internal alert. Draft resolution, temporary recusal of Chief Risk Architect pending ethics review. Draft resolution, Emergency Procurement Authority transferred to Director Halverson's committee. Already templated, already loaded before this meeting began. She looked up at Pierce. Did you know this resolution was queued? He kept his gaze on his folded hands. It's standard contingency language. Pre-written with my title in it? His jaw worked once. Natalie, this is not the moment. That hurt more than the insult. Not because she needed his loyalty anymore, but because she remembered when he had one. He had taught her to build systems that outlasted personalities. Then he had become exactly the personality those systems were meant to restrain. Keene said, 10-minute recess. No one moved. Halverson said, I recommend we proceed without interruption. The market opens in 40 minutes. Of course, not truth, timing. Natalie slid her hand into her bag, found the battered bronze challenge coin, and set it on the table beside her notebook. It made a small, unmistakable click against the walnut. Eli's eyes flicked to it, then to her face. He said nothing. She unlocked her phone beneath the table and opened an old secure thread with no name, only a number and a date stamp from 3 years ago. She had used it once during a field escalation when the chain of command was compromised. She typed, Coin on table. Cresswell Boardroom 41B. Active defamation against cleared personnel. Need truth authority now. NB. She stared 1 second, then hit send. No typing bubbles. No confirmation beyond delivered. She put the phone face down and lifted her chin. Continue, she said to counsel. The room did what institutions do when they sense blood. It became procedural. Counsel asked for Eli's contractor ID card. Eli handed it over. Halverson asked security to verify it physically. Security stepped in, took the badge like evidence, and stepped out again. Keene announced that until review was complete, Eli would be considered a non-cleared guest and restricted from digital access. I haven't accessed any systems, Eli said. Precautionary only, Keene replied, a precaution that was also a headline if leaked. Then came the vote motion she had expected, and still felt like a punch. Director Melroy cleared his throat. Given unresolved credibility concerns, I move temporary recusal of Ms. Barrett from all procurement oversight related to federal accounts until independent ethics review concludes. Seconded immediately. Pierce didn't speak, but he didn't object. Natalie said, on what grounds? Marital association with an unverified allegation? Melroy answered, perception risk. Perception manufactured by this room. Keene pinched the bridge of his nose. Natalie, stop making this adversarial. You froze a board vote on a screenshot. Halverson leaned in. Because, unlike you, some of us take fiduciary duty seriously. She turned to him. You mean seriously enough to route it through a shell compliance vendor so chain of custody looks external? The words landed. Too precise to be random. Halverson blinked once. I have no idea what you're implying. Then provide source headers. Keene's voice hardened. Ms. Barrett, one more interruption and I will have counsel conduct this with you removed. There it was, the threat wrapped in governance language. She nodded once and sat back, under protest. While they argued wording for her recusal, she opened her tablet's secondary partition, a mirrored archive she had built after the second time a file she authored reappeared under someone else's name. It wasn't a hack, it was retention. Automated copies of documents touching her risk office, metadata snapshots, email headers, vendor invoice hashes. Quiet, legal, boring. The kind of boring that survives court. She pulled the dossier file from the board packet. Properties first. Author blank. Producer Kestrel Compliance Solutions. Intake portal v3.2. Original file name th_credreview_Barrett_draft4.pdf. Embedded object, screenshot import from img_7714.png. Creation timestamp 5:12 a.m. local. Kestrel. Her pulse went cold. 3 months earlier, she had flagged Kestrel Compliance Solutions as a non-material advisory expense recurring across procurement review invoices, always just below mandatory board disclosure thresholds. Halvorson's committee had dismissed it as overflow screening support. She opened mirrored ledgers, filtered by vendor ID, then by approver credential. A string appeared. Payment authorizations from operations discretionary budget, approved by Halvorson's office, routed through a subcontractor holding company with the same post office box as Kestrel's registered agent. Not definitive yet, enough to pull. She drilled into email logs mirrored from the compliance intake alias. There it was. The anonymous submission had been forwarded from an external Kestrel account at 6:03 a.m., but the originating IP before masking traced to Cresswell Executive VPN. User token attached in hidden header. THALV-EXECAUTH2. She took a screenshot, then another, then exported raw headers to encrypted locale. At the table, Melroy was saying, "We should also self-report potential fraud exposure before this reaches competitors." Halvorson shook his head solemnly. Agreed. Voluntary report to federal fraud investigators by close of day shows integrity. Integrity built on evidence he manufactured. If they filed first, they controlled narrative first. Natalie looked up. "You want to call investigators? Great. Let's include complete source metadata and payment trails to Kestrel." Keene snapped. "You are out of order." "No," she said quietly. "I'm right on time." Pierce finally spoke, not to defend her, but to contain her. "Nat, listen to me. Let counsel run this. You're too close." Too close. She had built the controls. She had tracked anomalies they ignored. She was too close now that their script was slipping. She held his gaze. "You taught me not to trust memory over records." He looked away first. Her tablet flashed an access error. Permission changed. Archive sync suspended by administrator. They were trying to cut her off. She switched to offline cache mode. Everything up to 9:01 a.m. remained local. Enough. She initiated a background export to an external legal hold vault she controlled under whistleblower protocol. Progress bar crawled 12%, 19%. Counsel stood. "Given escalating tension, I advise we limit speaking rights to directors and designated counsel until review is complete." Halvorson nodded, magnanimous. "Reasonable." Keene looked at Natalie. "You may submit written comment." She almost laughed. Written comment while they recused her in real time. Eli spoke before she did. "If you're restricting her in a meeting where she is the principal officer on the agenda item, put my objection on the record." Counsel said, "You are not a party to this governance process, Mr. Barrett." Eli's mouth flattened. "No, I'm the excuse." The security officer returned Eli's badge in a clear evidence sleeve, as if contamination were physical. Tiny cruelty. Maximum theatre. Natalie took the sleeve, set it down unopened. Then she clicked one button and sent the first tranche of files to her protected packet queue. Header logs, vendor ledgers, timestamp conflict reports. If they wanted investigators, she'd give investigators something worth investigating. The debate turned frantic around her. Voices layering over one another. "Call outside counsel now." "No, wait for internal verification." "Market exposure if this leaks." "Leak control is impossible once security's involved." Then issue a statement. Cresswell initiated ethics action proactively. Every sentence was about optics, not truth, about who got to claim moral urgency first. Natalie stopped answering their questions and started arranging events. She drafted a timeline in her notebook. 512 dossier created, Halverson linked file name. 603 anonymous submission via Kestrel. 8:47 emergency authority draft loaded. 9 o'clock agenda freeze accusation launched. 9 : question mark recusal motion tabled preloaded, synchronized, coordinated. Operational sabotage. Not panic. Plan. Her export hit 100%. Confirmation pinged silently. Legal hold vault updated. Immutable copy generated. Only then did she let herself breathe. Counsel was saying, if Mr. Barrett cannot provide immediate documentary verification of deployments, we treat claims as unresolved. Eli answered, I cannot unseal classified records for your convenience. Halverson spread his hands again. There it is. Natalie didn't rise to the bait. She tapped the challenge coin once with her fingertip, then looked at Keene. You're about to take irreversible corporate action based on a forged intake stream, she said. Do not do that. Keene stared back, tired and irritated, and more afraid of liability than of injustice. Then give me something I can verify in this room, right now. She almost said, I just did. Instead, she said, You'll have it. His laugh was humorless. From where? Before she could answer, the assistant at the door straightened so abruptly her chair scraped the wall. She pressed a hand to her earpiece, eyes widening, then looked to Keene with the expression of someone trying to decide whether protocol outranked fear. Mr. Chairman, she said, voice tight, there is an unscheduled guest requesting immediate entry. Keene frowned. Name? A beat. General Marcus Vance, she said. Defense Acquisition Integrity Council. No one spoke. Halverson's face drained one shade lighter. Natalie closed her notebook, set her pen down parallel to its spine, and for the first time that morning allowed herself to stop defending and start sequencing. Halverson recovered first. No, he said too quickly. Absolutely not. This is a private corporate proceeding. We don't admit unscheduled federal observers without counsel review. Keene looked from him to the assistant. Did he say why he's here? He said only that this concerns the integrity of an active accusation involving cleared personnel, the assistant said, and that delay would be unwise. A muscle jumped in Halverson's jaw. Scripted intimidation? Natalie, did you summon him? She didn't answer him. She looked at Keene. Admit him. Counsel cut in. Mr. Chairman, I advise against immediate entry. If this touches classified matters, we expose the board to obligations we are not prepared to manage in open format. Open format? Natalie said. You livestream board summaries to shareholders with a delay. You made this open the second you froze agenda and called security. Keene swore under his breath. Shades down. Stream cut. The motorized blinds dropped over the glass walls with a low mechanical hum, turning the room from display case to bunker. On screen, the shareholder feed icon flashed amber, then red. Broadcast interrupted. Technical hold. Halverson didn't wait. Before any outside party enters, I move immediate protective action regarding data integrity. Ms. Barrett has been accessing restricted archives during active ethics proceedings. That is potential evidence tampering. The room shifted toward him like iron filings toward a magnet. He had given them a new fear they understood better than defamation: internal breach. Natalie kept her hands flat on the table. I accessed files I am authorized to access. Your permissions were revoked 12 minutes ago, Halverson said, yet activity continued. Because she had an offline mirror, because she documented everything, because he now needed to criminalize her habits before they buried him. Counsel turned to security. Seize Ms. Barrett's corporate tablet pending forensic lock. Also Mr. Barrett's phone and any removable media. Chain of custody starts now. Eli moved before Natalie did. Not aggressive, just absolute. You touch her devices without a written hold scope. I challenge seizure. You're not in standing, Counsel snapped. Security stepped closer anyway. Keene rubbed his face hard. Natalie, if you complied with protocol, surrendering devices protects you. Halverson added softly, Unless there's something to hide. It was a trap with clean edges. If she refused, she was obstructive. If she complied without safeguards, they could bury, alter, or misplace the metadata trail she had just captured. The files were already in her legal hold vault. What remained vulnerable were the outward traces that proved when and where protected notifications had been sent. She inhaled once. "I'll surrender under reciprocal hold. Signed by Chair and Council. Scope includes all director devices and procurement committee communications for 72 hours. Director Melroy barked a laugh. "You don't set terms while under review." "I do if you want anything from me admissible." Halverson turned to Keane. "See? She's hijacking procedure. We need containment now." Keane looked trapped between panic and precedent. Council said, "We can issue a narrow hold and expand later." "Narrow to me," Natalie said. "Convenient." Halverson ignored her and pressed forward. Voice measured, reasonable, lethal. "Mr. Chairman, I move temporary suspension of Ms. Barrett, pending forensic review for unauthorized data extraction, separate from recusal. Effective immediately. Badge and system access revoked." Seconded before he finished. Stakes clicked into place with brutal clarity. Suspension meant not just losing the Pentagon account, it meant losing her office, her access, her ability to shepherd self-reporting protocols before they were rewritten. Her whistleblower packet could be painted as retaliation by a disgruntled employee under investigation. If they fired her for cause, every future hearing would start with that stain. And if they tied Eli to fraud on top of it, they could make the whole Barrett name radioactive in defense contracting circles where trust was currency and rumors moved faster than any formal exoneration. Natalie looked at the challenge coin beside her notebook. Small, worn, inconveniently heavy for its size. At the door, the assistant spoke again, voice shaking now. "General Vance is requesting entry a second time." Halverson didn't let Keane answer. "Tell him counsel is unavailable. He can submit inquiries in writing." The assistant hesitated. Keane finally said, "Do that." When she left, Eli's expression changed. Not fear exactly, but the focused stillness of someone watching a line collapse. Natalie turned to Keane. "If you block a federal integrity officer after notice, that's on the record too." "Everything is on the record," Keane said, and sounded like a man who had forgotten records could outlive him. They took her tablet. Counsel drafted a one-page voluntary preservation receipt so fast it was obviously pre-built. Security held the device while she read each line. She struck 3 clauses with Keane's pen. Exclusive internal forensic control, unilateral confidentiality designation, delayed disclosure to subject. Counsel protested. She didn't hand it back until those were gone. "Phone 2, Halverson said. "No," Natalie said. "Personal device, non-corporate. It was in active use during proceedings. For legal counsel." "Prove it." She held his gaze. "Subpoena it." For 1 second she thought he would order seizure anyway. Then counsel murmured something about overreach and litigation exposure. Halverson sat back, furious smile returning in fragments. Eli surrendered his phone with less argument, and that hurt worse. He was calculating collateral, not fairness. A ping sounded from the wall console. Counsel checked, frowned, and angled the screen away before Natalie could read it. "Say it aloud," she said. He didn't. "Say it aloud," she repeated. Keane snapped. "Enough." Counsel finally spoke. "Data loss prevention flagged a secondary outbound encrypted transfer from Ms. Barrett's account to an external endpoint at 9:14. The transfer is quarantined pending investigation." The blood drained from her hands. Quarantined, not the immutable legal hold export. That copy had already sealed before LiveSync was cut. This was a separate outbound event, the external notification package and integrity manifest. If that packet was blocked, the preserved evidence still existed. But the timeline proving protected escalation could be distorted in this room into covert exfiltration. Halverson exhaled like a man saddened by predictable disappointment. There it is. Natalie felt for the first time all morning the floor tilt. She had planned for theft, for deletion, for public smearing. She had not planned for how fast a quarantined secondary transmission would be reframed in real time by the people she was documenting. Keane's voice came from far away. "Can you explain the transfer?" "Yes," she said, and heard the thinness in it. Protected reporting protocol. Without authorization? Under whistleblower provision, which requires notice to not when leadership is implicated. Halverson leaned toward Keane. She just admitted unauthorized export. I admitted protected escalation. Counsel typed rapidly. Statement captured. Outside the shaded glass, shapes moved. Security, assistance, someone from IT clutching a laptop. The boardroom had become an incident scene. Keane looked ancient suddenly. I'm putting both matters to vote, recusal and suspension, Eli said, low and dangerous. You suspend her now. You bury the only person in this room who knows where your procurement controls are actually failing. Melroy shot back. And you would know that how, Mr. Barrett? From your fabricated deployments? Eli stood. Security stepped in instantly, hands half raised. He didn't lunge, he didn't shout, he just stood, shoulders squared, and for the first time his composure cracked around the edges. I have spent 15 years not speaking about work so people in rooms like this can sleep believing systems are clean. Don't mistake silence for lack, Counsel said. Sit down or be removed. Eli looked at Natalie. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Not here, not this way. He sat. Keane called the vote. 2 motions back-to-back, voice vote first. Temporary recusal from federal procurement oversight. Administrative suspension pending forensic review. Aye. Pierce hesitated. Pierce. Then, aye. Natalie didn't realise she'd been holding her breath until the word left his mouth and took something with it she could not immediately name. 9 votes. No abstentions. Keane struck the table with his palm. Motion carries, effective immediately. It wasn't final termination. It was worse in some ways. Administrative limbo where they controlled narrative, access and time. Enough time to rewrite minutes, align stories, scrub channels, and frame her as unstable, retaliatory, compromised. Counsel stood. Ms. Barrett, surrender badge. She unclipped it and placed it beside the challenge coin. For a heartbeat, she thought, maybe I was late. Maybe precision isn't enough when power moves first. She hated herself for thinking it. Security escorted Eli into the adjacent executive waiting room under the pretense of non-party separation. The door shut softly behind him. For the first minute, he stood with both palms on the back of a leather chair and stared at nothing. He had done this before in other forms. Sit in small rooms while strangers debated his legitimacy from fragments he could not complete. Classification was a wall that protected operations and isolated people. You learned to live inside silence until it felt like skin. Through the wall he could hear muted voices. Natalie's lower than the rest, then Keane's clipped baritone, then the rolling cadence of men deciding outcomes before facts. A security officer waited by the door, polite and immovable. Eli sat finally, elbows on knees, hands clasped tight enough for his knuckles to pale. He became aware with a detached kind of irritation that his hands were shaking, not from fear of arrest, from memory. Kandahar had smelled like hot metal and dust and diesel burned too long in old engines. Their analytic support had come through a remote cell nobody in country ever saw, and twice those analysts had caught procurement anomalies that turned into ambush indicators. Twice lives had turned because someone in a windowless room had refused to ignore pattern noise. Natalie had been one of those someones. She had been younger, relentless, impossible to impress, and the only civilian he'd ever met who argued with colonels like truth had rank above everyone. He remembered the first time she'd told him, almost amused, "If they won't give me authority, I'll build process they can't step around." He had believed her because she said it like weather, inevitable. Now he sat 10 feet from a room where they were stepping around her in real time. A different memory rose, unwelcome. Years earlier, after an operation went sideways, an internal review had questioned his timeline entries. Not fabricated, misaligned by clock conversion and a redaction error, but enough for 1 month of whisper campaigns that he was embellishing service for contractor premiums. It had been corrected quietly, never publicly. The correction did not travel as far as the rumour. It never does. His father had called then, voice brittle with old military pride and private disappointment, and asked, "Tell me I don't have to defend you to men I served with." Eli had said, "You don't have to do anything." They hadn't spoken for 6 months. He had promised himself Natalie would never have to carry that kind of collateral for him. And yet, here they were, her career pinned under his sealed file, his silence weaponized against her evidence. He could feel guilt like a physical thing, a weight under the sternum. If he had refused to attend today, would Halvorsen have found another lever? Probably. Did probability matter when the person you loved just lost her badge while you sat behind a closed door? Not at all. His confiscated phone lay in an evidence sleeve on the side table, unreachable. He looked at it and thought about helplessness in modern form. All the names you couldn't call, all the proofs you couldn't produce, all the authority that moved on channels you were locked out of. The officer by the door cleared his throat. "You okay, sir?" Eli almost laughed. The man was younger than most of his old boots. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm under control." He closed his eyes and pictured Natalie in the boardroom, spine straight, expression neutral, pen aligned with notebook even when furious. People called that cold. He knew better. It was discipline built around hurt. If General Vance got turned away, if the transfer she sent was truly quarantined, if Keene signed whatever Halvorsen put in front of him next, this could become not just a bad day, but a permanent reframing. Natalie Barrett, suspended for data theft amid spousal fraud inquiry. In defense circles, labels stuck like tar. He bowed his head and whispered, too low for the guard to hear, "I'm sorry." Not because he had lied, because loving him had given their enemies a weapon. When he lifted his face again, his eyes were red-rimmed and dry. Vulnerability had a short operational window. After that, you moved. "Officer," he said, voice steadying, "I want my objection logged that I was separated before vote and denied opportunity to respond to allegations made in my presence." The officer blinked. "I can pass that to counsel." "Pass it now." He watched the man use the wall intercom. Tiny action. Record created, still a line of defense. Eli sat back and waited for either rescue or collapse, knowing sometimes they looked identical for the first few minutes. In the boardroom, Halvorsen made his final play. With Natalie's badge on the table and her tablet in a custody bag, he moved from accusation to architecture. "Given newly confirmed exfiltration indicators," he said, "we need immediate harm containment. I move, we classify all materials originating from Risk Architecture over the last quarter as potentially compromised and place them under Executive Review Committee control." Natalie stared at him. "That includes the Pentagon bid controls." "Exactly. We can't risk tainted governance artifacts." Tainted. He was trying to seize her entire framework under emergency protocol, relabel it contaminated, then reissue selected pieces through his committee with his allies as custodians. Not just winning today, erasing provenance for months. Keene hesitated. "That could delay contract submission." Halvorsen shook his head. "Not if operations absorbs implementation." Melroy added, eager now, "And we notify defense contacts that we acted decisively against internal misconduct." There it was, pre-written press logic made official. Natalie rose before counsel could order her seated. "If you do this, you are knowingly transferring federal control architecture to individuals under documented vendor conflict." Counsel said, "Sit down, Ms. Barrett." She didn't. "I have mirrored ledgers." "Seized," Halvorsen cut in. "And header trails tying your office token to the anonymous dossier." Keene slammed his hand down. "Stop! Both of you." The room went still. Keene spoke to counsel without looking at anyone else. "Can we legally continue while an external federal official is requesting entry?" Counsel swallowed. "Legally, yes. Prudentially, uncertain." Halvorsen seized the gap. "Then prudence says we finalise internal controls before inviting external theatre. Vote now." Natalie looked to Pierce one last time. "Michael, if you let this pass, you own what comes after." He looked wrecked, also cowardly. "I don't know what's true anymore," she answered, quiet and fatal. "You do. You just don't know what you can survive." Keene called for hands on Halvorsen's motion. Reclassify Risk Architecture materials as compromised, transfer custodianship to executive review, authorize immediate external statement of ethics action and personnel suspension. Hands started to rise. At that exact moment, the door handle turned from the outside. Locked. The assistant's voice came through, thin with panic. "Mr. Chairman, they are requesting entry under federal authority," Halverson shot back. "Tell them to wait!" A new voice followed, deeper, controlled, carrying even through the wood and glass. "Chairman Keene, this is General Marcus Vance. Open this door now, or I will treat delay as interference." No one moved. Keene's hand hovered in the air between vote and decision. Natalie stood beside her surrendered badge, coin glinting against walnut, and waited to see whether this room would choose obstruction in front of a witness it could not spin. Keene made the decision with a single jerking nod. "Open it!" The lock clicked. The door swung inward. General Marcus Vance entered without hurry, dress uniform immaculate, cap under his arm, winter air following him in a faint draft of cold and wool. He was older than Natalie remembered from field briefings, silver at the temples now, but the same economy of motion, the same gaze that took in exits, faces, objects, and hierarchy in one sweep. He clocked the security officers, the evidence sleeves, Natalie standing beside her surrendered badge, and then the challenge coin on the table. His eyes came back to hers. "Ms. Barrett." "General." Halverson stood halfway. "General Vance, with respect, this is a private board proceeding. You have no authority to force entry—" Vance didn't look at him. "Chairman Keene, I am here in my capacity with the Defense Acquisition Integrity Council regarding an active accusation against cleared personnel and potential interference with protected reporting. You were advised not to delay." Keene swallowed. "General, we were consulting counsel." "Consult faster." Counsel found his voice. "If classified matters are introduced, we need to control exposure." Vance held out a sealed envelope. "Then control this." Counsel took it with shaking fingers, broke the seal, scanned, and went very still. Keene said, "What is it?" Counsel answered quietly, "Limited declassification authorization, specific to identity and service verification for Mr. Eli Barrett and Miss Natalie Barrett's prior operational support role, signed this morning." A long silence followed. Halverson's chair creaked as he sat back down. Vance finally stepped to the table and, with a small motion, touched the challenge coin. "May I?" Natalie slid it toward him. He turned it over in his hand once, the worn edge, the scratched insignia, and placed it beside the envelope. "Record this clearly," he said. "Mr. Eli Barrett's credentials are valid. Elements of his record are sealed by lawful classification, not fabrication. Ms. Natalie Barrett served as Command Analytic Lead in support of operations relevant to this dispute. Any continued public allegation of fraud after this notice exposes this company and individuals to defamation liability and potential obstruction concerns." Keene exhaled like someone punched. Melroy stared at the table. Pierce closed his eyes. Halverson rallied fast. "General, no one is alleging anything publicly. We are conducting internal due diligence based on a compliance submission and an unauthorized data export by Ms. Barrett." Natalie spoke before Vance could. "The compliance submission was manufactured through a vendor tied to your office." Halverson snapped toward her. "Prove it without stolen files." She reached for her phone. Counsel lifted a hand. "If that device contains corporate data under hold, it contains my legal hold confirmations and independent metadata captures created before my suspension vote," she said. "You want admissibility. I'm giving you chain of custody in front of a federal integrity officer." Vance gave a tiny nod. "Proceed." Natalie connected her phone to the room display adapter with an adapter she carried in her bag because she trusted redundancy more than people. The screen changed from frozen agenda text to a plain black interface. She opened a folder labeled 09 Dashboard Integrity Packet. "Time-stamped exports from my mirrored archive, hashed at capture," she said. "First dossier properties." On screen, the PDF metadata populated line by line. Original file name th_credreview_Barrett e_draft4.pdf. A murmur moved around the table. Halverson laughed once, brittle. "Anyone can rename a file." "Good," Natalie said. "Then let's move to headers." She opened the intake email raw source. Rows of characters, routing stamps, server hops. She highlighted one field. Origin token premask THALV-E XECAUTH2. This anonymous compliance packet originated inside Cresswell Executive VPN under Director Halverson's authorization credential before being routed through Kestrel Compliance Solutions. Counsel leaned toward the screen, pale. Zoom in. She did. Halverson said, louder now, "Forged. This is exactly why we suspended her." Natalie didn't flinch. "Then cross-verify with finance." She pulled up the vendor ledger extract she had already pushed to legal hold. Kestrel billed as non-material advisory support. Recurring amounts just under disclosure threshold. Approvals signed from operations discretionary budget. Approver string leads to your office and a holding company sharing Kestrel's registered agent address. Keane whispered, "Jesus!" Halverson slammed a palm on the table. "Circumstantial accounting noise. You can't tie me to—" "I can tie you to your own voice." That got everyone's attention. Natalie opened an audio file. Call dated last Thursday, 21/18, captured under Cresswell retention policy because you used corporate bridge lines. She looked at counsel. Legal had this archived. They just didn't know what to search for until now. She hit play. Static. Then Halverson's unmistakable voice. "If Barrett forces procurement vote, we lose the pipe. Neutralize her before agenda. Burn the husband first. Ethics freeze does the rest." A second voice, Melroy's lower. "Can we source it outside?" Halverson. "Kestrel intake, make it look anonymous. Keane will panic and counsel will follow process." The clip ended. No one moved. Melroy whispered, "That's edited." Natalie tapped the file info pane. "Checksum, original bridge archive ID and retention certificate are attached. Counsel can validate in 60 seconds. All eyes turned to counsel. He typed, hands trembling, queried the archive, then froze. "It matches," he said. The room seemed to lose oxygen. General Vance spoke with the calm of a man giving weather updates over battlefield radio. "Chairman Keane, you now have evidence of deliberate defamation against cleared personnel, attempted manipulation of procurement governance, and potential retaliation against a protected reporter. Your next actions matter." Keane nodded too quickly. "Security—" "Wait," Halverson barked. He stood, face red now, mask gone. "You're all panicking because she staged a narrative with outside pressure. That recording doesn't establish criminal intent. At worst, it's harsh language in a strategy call. We had legitimate concerns about Mr. Barrett's timeline discrepancies and her unauthorized exports. You cannot remove me on this." Natalie turned to him, voice almost gentle. "I'm not removing you on harsh language. I'm removing you on sequence." She clicked to one final slide. Her handwritten timeline rebuilt digitally, each event pinned to source. 512 dossier creation, 603 Kestrel forward from Halverson token, 847 emergency recusal/suspension resolutions loaded, 914 DLP quarantine of her protected notification package, 916 motion to seize risk architecture controls. "Your plan required a narrow window," she said. "Discredit Eli, recuse me, suspend me, seize controls, file a self-report framed as decisive ethics leadership, then route federal funds through the same subcontract channel I flagged. You moved too fast, Tom. Fast leaves timestamps." For the first time all morning, Halverson had no immediate answer. He recovered by attacking everything at once. "I demand independent forensic review before any action. I invoke director privilege. Counsel advised them this material is tainted by unauthorized extraction and potential espionage. General or no general, this board cannot rely on illegally obtained data." Counsel opened his mouth, closed it, looked to Keane, then to Vance, then back to the screen. "Director privilege does not shield fraud planning." Halverson whirled on him. "You work for this board." "I work for the corporation," Counsel said and sounded sick. Melroy pushed back his chair hard. "This is a coup. Keane, if you let her and the general run this room, shareholders sue all of us." Natalie seized the opening. "Then protect shareholders correctly. Immediate motions. Rescind my suspension and recusal. Place litigation hold on all director devices and procurement channels. Remove directors Halverson and Melroy from all committees pending cause review. Notify federal authorities with full supporting metadata. And reinstate risk architecture controls under independent monitor." Halverson laughed incredulously. Listen to her. She thinks she chairs this board. Not yet, she said. Keane stared at her for a long beat, then at the transcript screen, then at the audio log. I.D. Pierce spoke, voice rough. Keane, she's right about one thing. Sequence is fatal. I got a call from Tom at 7:10 to prepare contingency language naming her office before this meeting started. Halverson snapped, Michael... Pierce cut him off, shaking now. Don't! I'm done covering. Halverson's face hardened into something meaner than panic. Fine. You all want fire? She exported data externally. She contacted federal actors off-book during active proceedings. She weaponized classified associations to intimidate governance. I will personally file claims for breach of fiduciary duty and corporate espionage. Natalie met him without blinking. Do that. In Discovery, we'll subpoena every Kestrel invoice, every bridge call, every encrypted message your assistant deleted from retention and forgot mirrored backups keep for 30 days. He froze. Tiny tell. Enough. You don't know what I deleted, he said. She gave him a thin smile. Thank you for confirming deletion. Melroy cursed under his breath. General Vance stepped forward a fraction. Director Halverson, you are now advised that destruction or alteration of records after notice constitutes obstruction risk. Do not touch your devices. Security, secure this room. Security moved for the first time with clear purpose. 2 officers took positions behind Halverson and Melroy. Halverson didn't sit. Keane, this is insane. You let armed uniforms dictate board governance and you're finished. Keane straightened in his chair, the first hint of spine Natalie had seen all morning. No, Tom. I let your arrogance dictate governance, and I'm finished if I keep doing it. He looked to Counsel. Draft emergency motions now. Counsel began reading them aloud as he typed. Each one entered on record. Rescission of Natalie's suspension, rescission of recusal, immediate litigation hold enterprise-wide, formation of special committee excluding implicated directors, referral to federal investigators. Vote, Keane said. Ayes came slower this time, but they came. Investor Relations, Annika Rao, Natalie remembered suddenly, said, Aye first, clear as a bell. Pierce said it next, eyes on the table. 2 independents followed. Keane last. Nay? Silence. Halverson shouted, Nay. Melroy, Nay. Motion carries, Keane said. Halvorsen grabbed his briefcase. I'm leaving. Vance's voice cracked across the room. You leave with unsecured devices and I'll have you stopped in the lobby. Halverson took one more step anyway. Security closed in. For a second, Natalie thought he might physically resist. Instead, he turned at the door, breathing hard, and looked straight at her with naked hatred. You think this ends because you won 1 room? She picked up her challenge coin and slid it into her palm. No. It ends because I documented every room before this one. Security escorted him out. Melroy followed, protesting into the hallway until his voice blurred into distance. Through the partially raised shades, the shareholder feed monitor flickered back online, the delayed stream catching fragments of escorts, raised voices, uniforms in frame. Optics finally telling the truth. Counsel requested Eli be brought back. When he re-entered, evidence sleeve still in hand, Vance turned and gave him a brief nod that carried history and apology and confirmation in one motion. Mr. Barrett, Vance said, loud enough for the transcript, for the record, your service stands. Eli only said, Thank you, sir. But Natalie saw his shoulders drop a fraction, tension he had worn for years, loosening where no one could fake it. The room after a detonation is always strange. Same walls, new physics. Chairs were crooked, water glasses sweated untouched rings into polished wood. Counsel's tie was loosened half an inch. Keane looked 10 years older and, for the first time, less certain that Polish could substitute for leadership. He cleared his throat. Ms. Barrett, Natalie, I need your recommendation for immediate stabilization. Not numbers, girl. Not even Miss Barrett. Her name, plain. She stayed standing. First, restore my team's system access and isolate procurement workflows from operations within the hour. Second, initiate self-report under Protocol 4C, the one I submitted and you tabled last month. Third, appoint an external monitor chosen jointly by audit and federal oversight, not by this board. Fourth, issue a correction statement on Eli now before rumour metastasizes. Keene nodded as she spoke, writing by hand because no one trusted the room's devices anymore. Counsel said, correction language should avoid admission of liability. Natalie looked at him. Facts are not liability. Spin is. Annika Rao spoke up. She's right. If we hedge, the market assumes worse. Clean statement, immediate. Keene rubbed his forehead. Draft it. General Vance checked his watch. My office will remain on site for document preservation and contact with investigators. Do not treat this as optional. He looked at Natalie. You have what you need. She thought of the quarantined package, the mirrored cache, the recordings, the votes, the rescinded suspension order now entered in minutes. I do now. Vance picked up his cap. At the door he paused, glanced at the coin in her hand and said quietly, You used it exactly once. Good judgment. When he was gone, noise rushed back. It called in. Audit notified. Legal hold notices flying. Crisis machinery, this time pointed in the right direction because she had forced the vector. Eli moved to her side, not touching yet, waiting for permission in front of others the way he always did. You okay? She opened her mouth, found no immediate answer, and gave him a short nod that meant functional. He accepted it. Keene signed the rescission order and slid it across the table toward her. Effective immediately. She read every line. Add one clause. No retaliation against risk architecture staff or cooperating witnesses. He added it. Pierce lingered by the wall until most people were busy, then approached with the posture of a man approaching a blast crater he helped dig. Nat! Don't, she said. He flinched. I should have stopped this earlier. Yes. I can give a statement. You will. She finally looked at him. And you'll include your 7:10 call. He nodded once, ashamed and relieved to have instructions. In the hallway outside, the sound of raised voices echoed again. Halverson arguing with federal agents now visible through the glass, face flushed, hands cuffed only after he reached for his phone, despite direct order. Melroy sat on a bench with his tie undone, staring at nothing. Natalie watched for 2 seconds, then turned away. Vindication felt less like triumph than like muscle failure after carrying too much weight too long. By the time she and Eli reached the elevator, her hands had started to shake. Inside the mirrored box, doors closed, city falling away beneath them. She leaned back against steel and let her head tip briefly to his shoulder. He put an arm around her, careful, firm. Breathe, he murmured, echoing the morning. She laughed once, ragged. I am. On the lobby floor, reporters were already gathering behind the rope line. Phones up, hungry. Security ushered them through a side corridor that smelled like copier toner and rain-damp coats. At the exit, Eli stopped. Home? She looked back up the stairwell toward the floors above where she had just been suspended and unsuspended in the same hour, where men had tried to erase her with process and failed. Not yet, she said. I need to watch them send the correction. They sat in an empty legal conference room on the 6th floor with stale coffee and a wall clock that ticked too loudly. Counsel emailed the statement draft. Natalie redlined it in 12 places. He had written, Cresswell acknowledges questions raised regarding the credentials of an external guest. She changed it to, Cresswell retracts false allegations made today against Eli Barrett. He had written, the company is reviewing internal process irregularities. She changed it to, the board initiated an independent investigation into evidence of directed misconduct by specific directors. He had written, Ms. Barrett has resumed duties pending review. She changed it to, Natalie Barrett's suspension and recusal were rescinded as unsupported. She remains Chief Risk Architect and lead for federal procurement controls under independent oversight. Counsel read her edits, inhaled, and clicked send. For the first time all day, she felt something settle. That night, long after statements went out and calls stopped and the city thinned to sirens and distant traffic, Natalie stood in their kitchen barefoot in the dark, refrigerator light spilling across the tile. She had opened the door and forgotten why. Eli came in quietly, t-shirt and sweatpants, hair damp from a shower. He took in the untouched glass in her hand, the faraway stare. Hey, he said. She shut the fridge. I'm running loops. Me too. He leaned against the counter opposite her, not crowding. For a while they stood in the hum of appliances and the soft tapping of rain at the window. She said, "When they took your badge in that plastic sleeve, I wanted to break something." He gave a humorless smile. "I noticed. I didn't, because that would have helped them." She looked down at her hands. "I hate that this is what control costs." Eli nodded slowly. "Can I say something ugly? Please?" In that waiting room, I thought, maybe you'd be better off if my records were ordinary, if I were ordinary. No sealed years, no silence they can weaponize. She looked up sharply. "Don't do that." "It's true." "It's not." Her voice rose, then steadied. "Tom didn't use your records because they were mysterious. He used you because you're the thing I love most, and he thought pain would make me sloppy." Eli's jaw tightened. "It almost worked." "It didn't." He laughed once, bitter. "Nat, I sat behind a door while they voted you out. I couldn't do a damn thing." "You logged your objection. You stayed in control when they wanted you angry on camera. You came back into that room and stood there while a general confirmed what you've had to not say for years." She stepped closer. "Don't confuse helpless with useless." He looked away toward the window, rain streaking city lights into blurred lines. "My father called this evening." She blinked. "What did he say?" Eli swallowed. "He said, 'I saw the correction. I'm sorry I ever doubted you back then.'" Then he cried. I have never heard him cry. Natalie's chest hurt unexpectedly. "Eli." "I told him I wasn't angry." He rubbed both hands over his face. "That was partly true. Mostly I was tired. Today brought all of it back. The old rumour, the month no one would look me in the eye, the feeling that if I can't show the whole file, then maybe I don't fully exist." She crossed the small space and took his wrists, lowering his hands. "You exist to me in full." His eyes were wet now, unguarded in a way she had seen only twice in their marriage. "I was so scared they'd take your career because of me." She shook her head. "They almost took it because of themselves, because I stayed quiet too long in rooms that trained me to translate insult into professionalism." He let out a breath that shuddered halfway through. "When you stood up today and said fast leaves timestamps, I thought, there she is, the woman who terrifies liars." She huffed a laugh, then covered her face briefly with one hand. "I was terrified." "I know." He touched her cheek. "Courage isn't the absence part." They stood there, foreheads almost touching. She said softly, "I need one promise." "Anything. No more carrying alone. If they come at us again, we don't protect each other by withholding impact. We say when we're scared. We say when it hurts." He nodded immediately. "Yes, I mean it, Eli." "So do I." He took a breath. "Then my turn. One promise from you." "Okay. If you're going to war in a boardroom, don't leave me in the lobby with a 'be right back' text." Despite herself, she smiled. "Fair. Not joke fair, real fair." She cupped the back of his neck. "Real fair." He closed his eyes at the touch, then opened them and said, voice rough, "I love you in the ugly parts too, not just when you win." Her throat tightened. "I know. I need to hear it." She leaned in and kissed him slowly, deliberately, the kind of kiss that says answer before words do. When she pulled back, she said it anyway. "I love you in the silence and the noise, in the classified blanks and the board transcripts. In all of it." He laughed wetly. "That's unbearably on brand." "Precision matters," she said, and he kissed her again, harder this time, one hand at her waist, the other trembling just enough for honesty. They ended up on the kitchen floor with their backs against the cabinets, sharing a bowl of cereal at midnight because neither could stomach anything else. At one point he rested his head in her lap, and she threaded her fingers through his damp hair while he talked about Kandahar in fragments she had never heard, dust storms, bad coffee, the first time he trusted a voice in an earpiece that turned out to be hers. She told him about being 29 and the only woman in a risk cell where men repeated her points louder and got thanked first. They traded old ghosts until both were less crowded by them. "Near 2 a.m, he said, sleepy and serious. "Whatever title you take next, I'm in the back row on purpose, not as a prop." She smiled into the dark. "Deal." 3 days later, the boardroom looked different, even though the walnut table was the same. No donor portraits. Natalie had ordered them removed and replaced with 2 large whiteboards, now filled with process maps and hold protocols. The shades were half open. Daylight, no bunker. Halverson's chair sat empty, nameplate gone, Melroy's too. At 9 o'clock sharp, Keane called the special session to order. He looked chastened, rehearsed less, listened more. Beside him sat Annika Rao, now interim governance lead. Across from them, 2 federal observers took notes without expression. First item, Keane said, formal acceptance of Director Halverson's removal for cause and referral package transmission receipt. Counsel slid a binder across. Receipt confirmed by U.S. Attorney's Office at 7:42. Charges under review include wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction-related conduct. Pierce was not in the room. He had resigned the day before and signed a cooperation agreement that required 6 hours of recorded testimony Natalie had watched in silence. Second item, Keane continued, public correction and apology statement final review. He read from the page. No adjectives, no self-congratulation, no passive voice. Facts, retraction, responsibility, corrective actions. It was exactly as Natalie had edited it. She nodded once. Approved. Third item, Keane said, and glanced up with something like respect. Defense contract award notification. Annika couldn't suppress a small smile. Pentagon account awarded at 8:11 this morning to Cresswell Risk Architecture Implementation Team, conditioned on independent oversight. Citation language reads, demonstrated integrity under pressure and documented control maturity. Natalie let herself feel that for one full breath. In the back row, Eli sat where he promised he would. Quiet, present, no theatre. When she looked his way, he touched 2 fingers to his temple, in a tiny salute only she caught. Final item, Keane said. Election of board chair. Silence, then votes, one by one. Aye. No one said numbers, girl. Keane stood. Chair Barrett. It landed with weight and without fanfare. Natalie rose, walked to the head of the table and set her agenda down. Then she placed the battered bronze challenge coin beside it, not hidden in her bag, not used as a plea. A marker. Around the table, eyes tracked it, then lifted to her face. She looked at each director in turn, making sure they understood the terms of the new reality. We start with controls, she said, and we keep names attached to work. Outside the glass, staff moved through the corridor at normal speed, carrying coffee, tablets, ordinary Tuesday worries. Inside, the room held still for 1 beat longer, recalibrating around a center they had tried to remove. Then pens clicked, screens lit, and they got to work.